We are live. Welcome to the Movement Post Series Google Hangout, presented by Transforming Communities Technical Systems Training and Resource Center on behalf of the Grow Forward project. I'm Alana Bloom, and I'm the project associate for TC-TAT, and I'm joined here today with Kristen Shrimplin and Debbie Brooks of YWCA Cincinnati and Rachel Maris of the Ohio Domestic Violence Network. I don't know if you want to introduce yourselves. I realize I just introduced you for yourselves, but
that's okay.
Is it?
Okay.
Hi, ladies. We know each other.
I'll stick my face in here because I'm letting. Hold on. Oh, I'm letting Kristen be the face of our group, but you can see me briefly. This is Debbie Brooks, Executive VP at the Y.
And Kristen Shrimplin, Director for the Family Prevention Project.
Ooh. Nice picture, Kristen. Hi, I'm Rachel. Is it just the three of us on this?
Rachel, everyone who gets on is seen.
So does everybody who get on?
So everyone, so it's completely live right now, so it's being broadcast publicly, but I don't think anyone's watching it. I have 0 viewers, so.
Okay.
So you might want to.
It'll be something that we send out later.
So we missed our 15 minutes of fame.
So I'm just going to quickly explain.
You do too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to quickly explain to all of you the poster timeline series that TC-TAT created. Actually, I created it for TC-TAT, but Christopher was also a big help, and Christopher and I are two of TC. We created an electronic violence against women timeline, our Communities of Practice website, which was launched on October 23rd. But I want to create a series of posters for participating organizations to easily access and print for their own use. The entire timeline project, one thing that I've been aware of is that I'm basically inventing the wheel. There's a lot of domestic violence and sexual assault timelines out there.
I'm not hearing you.
Produced by many newer educational tools. You can't hear me? Is it coming in and out?
You're kind of, I can hear you for a few words, and then I can't hear words, and then I can hear you for a few words, so I don't know if that's your experience, Kristen and Debbie, too.
Yes, you're actually buffering.
Oh, no, I am.
This is why this, like, live doesn't work.
Does this help? Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
We'll see.
Okay.
See, I'm...
Okay. So
it still seems to be problematic. You're delayed. You're delayed. You're buffering still.
Okay. That's frustrating. I'm sorry to hear that.
This is a part of the technology. I just want to let you all know, because I was telling Alana earlier, I did a training. It was a training through the National Organizations of Victim Assistance. They had us do a training that was an online academy through, and it was actually for domestic abuse victim advocates across the world at military bases. And a lot of this technology stuff, it's got to do with the strength of your wireless. It's got to do with, like, your internet connection and my internet connection and everybody's. So there was just some stuff, and they have a big, super expensive program, but a part of it is just, it just depends on. So I mean, I did 3 sessions in one day, and 2 of them were fine, and one I had to end up calling in at the end, and it's just, there's lots of variables that are outside of people's control.
Right. So, yeah, and we're definitely experiencing a few technical difficulties over here today, and this is a new system for us, so I apologize for any delays or issues that we're having on today's Google Hangout. If I'm still cutting out, perhaps we should just jump in to, because I hear perfectly talking about the work that you've done, because I feel like that's ultimately what is, well, it's extremely important to me here. And so,
What were you saying, Rachel?
hello?
I was saying I can't hear her. Yeah,
Okay.
Alana, I can't hear
gonna-
you.
Rachel,
Okay.
I think what Alana was is that she's going to float over the opportunity for both of our agencies to talk about how we've used the timeline.
Okay.
Has ODVN, have you utilized the timeline yet?
Well, we haven't utilized I don't know if there's an official one that's on the website. That is not something that, is that what you all have used?
That's the yeah. Alana had created this great PDF with all the slides. It's a replica.
Or just how to incorporate.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember that what we have done, and maybe that's what, I mean, and I want to hear about what you all have done with that. I mean, we've done something that's probably similar. Kind of the thing that I've been thinking about a lot related to kind of movement history and what it is that means and how that ties together with what it is that we're doing now is, you know, I'm becoming the little trauma-informed care queen over here, and that's what a lot of our big new initiatives are around. I'm going to be spending a lot of time focusing on that in the upcoming years. But I do think that one of the realities about the whole, I mean, I really think that trauma-informed principles and trauma-informed, it's the same stuff as the philosophical principles that really were a part of the kind of original thought process of what domestic violence services is and what they should look like. The wording's a little bit different in some places, but it's the same stuff. So I think a lot of that has really been, even with this, and I think people connect to the language around trauma and trauma-informed care. There's a little bit more science stuff in that than kind of when we were movement history in the 1960s and 70s. We just didn't know all the neuroscience stuff that we know now. But like the kind of core principles of trauma-informed services are pretty much the same. I mean, it's the same stuff. So what we have done, I mean, a couple of times, and I remember being very impressed with when we were out in California with that long timeline that was on the wall and having us do it. And that's something that has been in our minds to do someday, and of course nobody has had time to think it through and put it back together. But and I haven't downloaded this stuff off the website yet, but we have done a couple of different trainings. A lot of times what we do is we'll do a history read around, and I don't know if it's that same thing. I mean, it might be, and we'll have people everybody gets different cards, and we'll kind of read through the history. The other thing that we found to be very helpful is there's a new documentary that I think is actually out now called Private Violence, which is, and I have the DVDs right here, and we actually bought this maybe a couple of years ago, and it's a trainer's edition, and it was before the documentary was done. I think that they were selling these, I mean, it was $40 or $50 to help raise funds to do the whole thing, and I think that the whole thing's done now. I think that the whole thing is, and I haven't seen the whole thing yet. It hasn't. I just was looking it up online before this, and I think it's started to debut at some film festivals, but there wasn't anywhere to buy it yet or anything. But it's about a 18 or 20-minute DVD that is up to date, that does a really, really good job kind of concisely going through kind of the history of some of our stuff. But what I really like about it is it also really connects it to future work. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, is I'm thinking through how we're integrating history. When I'm training, I don't want that to be like a little 20-minute section. You know, like, okay, here's a little movement piece, and then we never, but it's really connecting, making some of those connections. So one of the things at the upcoming sexual violence conference that's at the end of the month, I'm doing a session on kind of connecting the past to the present and the future. So I think for me, it's more than just, like, this is very relevant now and today and moving forward. But I also think that that's through all of this wanting people, because everyone's on the trauma-informed care bandwagon now. But this is like, it's just how it works. This is not something that the trauma people invented, because this is the same stuff in different languages. So just have different words and different thought processes. So that's kind of what we've been working on over here. It hasn't been, we had our little follow-on call with Christopher, and it hasn't been very strategic and well planned out, but that's kind of what we've been doing.
Quick question, Rachel.
Great.
So you're going to be incorporating that into the training. Which training was it that's upcoming?
Well, there is the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. They have their annual conference at the end of June.
Okay.
We're actually doing a workshop session that's going to be about kind of the past and the present. So maybe that will help me kind of strategically move this forward. But for example, I use this private violence video because one of the things is I was just doing a what is domestic violence work presentation for a social work class at Ohio State last week, and particularly with when I'm doing social workers, you know, who are much more the whole ecological model, person and environment type piece, like knowing how this all fits in the bigger picture is very important. And it's different than, I mean, it integrates in the movies. I mean, the video is really good. You know, Joe, it's probably from, it has to be from, at least the one that we have was filmed, it has to be from before 2008 because Joe Biden was still a senator whenever they filmed him. But it's very, I mean, there's a bunch of, it kind of ends with, you know, it talks some about the history, and it goes kind of through the decades, but it's not like the, in 1991, blah, 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 in 1994, blah, 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 blah. But it's kind of some of those bigger chunks and bigger pieces. Debbie Tucker from the National Resource Center is in there. Some people, Russ Funk is in there. There's a lot of Joe Torre's in there. So it talks a lot about the Engaging Men stuff that's coming up. You know, the Family Violence Prevention Fund is in there, about the teen work. So it's not just like, our history's back there.
Right.
But what I'm trying to do, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities to bridge this, because, I mean, and a part of this is also like, guess what? These concepts around like the conceptual pieces of trauma-informed services should not be new to us.
Right.
It shouldn't be new, because it's the same thing. It is.
Absolutely.
Like supporting survivors and collaboration and empowerment and da-da-da-da-da and control and autonomy, and that should not be new stuff to us.
Well, Rachel, let me ask you a second question. You said you were doing the history read-arounds or roundabouts, or...
Yeah. Oh, I like the roundabouts thing. That sounds even funner.
So are you doing that with staff, or are you doing that in trainings? How are you incorporating?
I've done it in trainings before. So what we will do is we'll give people cards with, read them. I mean, it's just a different way of interacting with people. So when we'll start kind of at the beginning, and someone will read, 752, blah, 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 and then the next person will go around. And that has been, it's a different way of engaging people. Mm-hmm. And, it gives people, I think that the things you want to be careful about, I mean, you can do, Tanya and I got into a big argument because, like, the last time we did it, there were, like, I don't know, we had, like, 30, I don't know, it was, like, 30, and I thought it was too many, and she thought it was fine, and, I mean, I think that you also want to make sure that if you're giving people things to read, you just need to make sure that, because, I mean, most people are okay reading out loud, but you also want to make sure, like, it's readable, and it's big enough, and there aren't words that are too unknown, unfamiliar, uncomplicated for people. But that's always really embarrassing when you are in a training and don't know how to pronounce a word. But
and the purpose of this is to get reconnected to the roots of our movement and what our history is and what we're here today to also try to carry out in the vision in the future. Is that how you?
Yeah, and I think, and I think a part of it is also, where you have lots of people who come into this work from not having any kind of, with a social services background, which is fine, But, you know, I mean, I think that's the thing is, like, yeah, domestic violence stuff has been around for a long time. I mean, not for a long time, but, like, for us, like, you know, I'm 35, so, like, we've always had shelters. We've always had, I mean, I just think it helps people understand some of the really, really kind of the deep, deep, deep stuff. And, you know, even whenever, you know, and whenever we do trainings, like, and I almost always, every training, I was doing a training this morning at some random conference, and we're talking about the power and control wheel. Like, when we're talking about the power and control wheel and you're talking about male privilege, like, I mean, it's always like this is like thousands of years deep. And I know that we have female senators right now, and I know that more women go to law school now than men do, you know what I mean? But, like, really helping people understand the depth and the complexity of that. But also in a time that's appropriate, you know what I mean? Because, like, we're not talking about the 1800s, but how do you realize, like, wow! Because I think a lot of, you know, particularly younger women who have grown up in kind of this whole different, like, we're all empowered and we can do everything and done, and, you know, and there are lots of young advocates that we work with who are, you know, kind of fresh out of college, who don't have kids, and, you know, have this whole, like, I mean, not that that's bad, but just the whole, like, I will tell you, like, how much of my, I mean, I also think about this stuff a lot because this is what I do. But, you know, how much of my, like, understanding of what some of that male privilege is and looks like, and now that I am a mother, and that, and so it helps people kind of just get, you know, and I talk about this being, like, this is deep. I mean, I would say, like, deep, deep, thousands of years deep, deep. You know, like, deep. But I think that has been, again, it's a different way to engage people as opposed to, you know, me just standing up there and reading through these random facts. But I have really, most than anything, I've really have liked this. And I actually just sent them email to the private violence website. Because, again, we got this a couple of years ago, and I just was looking at it again. And I think the documentary is more about following an individual stories, but this one is really about kind of the history of the movement. There's lots of men in there, too, which I think is also helpful, and it doesn't look super old.
The I think we'll look for the DVD, but also, would you be willing to share the training tools that you're using, those cards rounds, because we can incorporate those. We've been trying to incorporate some things slowly with our leadership staff, with leadership opportunities, and bringing in frontline advocates and others to talk about the work that they do. And we were going to do Reconnecting Your Roots, the exercise that they had taken us through in California. And Alana, thank you. Thank you for the PDFs. Like, we got those printed out really big, and so I think we're going to make that happen. We're going to try to get as many staff as possible in May or June. So we'll be able to roll through that. Just one quick question for you, Alana. I know when we originally went through this in California, some of the perspective of the more marginalized folks or underserved folks who've been leaders in the movement weren't as represented, and I know that in the future there's going to try to be done some research to look at who else can we incorporate. And I know you haven't, I didn't know if you've had any updates where you've been able to find any more of that, and I can make sure that I put it into our timeline when we do it, or if we should just run through it as is.
So that's a great question. One thing that was really challenging with this project was that it's really obvious that the people who recorded history in a very mainstream way and made it available for us were of a very particular group of white, heterosexual, upper middle class feminists. And with my research, I've tried to focus on marginalized communities and make it as inclusive as possible, but in some ways I feel like we could, but to me it's not done, and I very much view it as a living document. So if there's updates or changes or additions, I absolutely welcome them and would love it if you shared them with me, because I want to make it something that is accessible to everyone, especially incorporating women of color, women and gender nonconforming individuals and transgender individuals, the LGBTQ movement. I mean, there's just so many different avenues that I want to explore with the project. but my resources are limited, and
What
I don't have as many resources as I did when I was researching this stuff, for example, in college, and would absolutely love more information and want to make it very broad and accessible.
Well, I'm wondering if, so that might be an interesting thing as different organizations are doing this. I would imagine that when we roll this out, whether that's end of May or sometime in June, that people, our staff will bring it to our attention, such as, you know what, you didn't have this up there. This is something that's really important, you know, with violence against women with disabilities. So here's a leader, here's a champion, here's a time in the empowerment and self-determination movement that should be there. And then those are pieces that, as organizations do this across the country, they could filter back to you. So you're not having to try to be like the end-all to be-all, you know, voice in figuring out what all of these pieces are.
Which would be so fantastic. I, again, would just absolutely appreciate it. I also want to make it known that I don't want this to be a project where it's just me sitting in my bubble gathering information. I want it to be a group effort, because I have a very particular lens as a young white feminist, lesbian professional, but I want to really broaden that and make it more accessible, and to include other voices that, I mean, I've probably overlooked. So,
and this might just be an idea, and of course, look at me. Well, but I was wondering if there might be a way to send along. I think, and the thing is, I was telling you with Tanya and I that we went back and forth on, because I think you also don't want to make. I'm also a little bit. I come from the ADD school of reality. So like like you don't want to make it so big and so much that I don't read through anything because it's too much. And that's what we know with Tanya. I was like, well, this is good, but this needs to be like 20 things, not like we don't need to do every single year, because lots of stuff has happened since the 1970s. So really, what is important, what matters, what are things that, because I just think the more information you put in there, the less people kind of remember individually, if that makes sense. Yes. But I was wondering if sending some of these documents to some of our other national TA centers, like the Woman of Color Network, or Casa de Esperanza, or the Safe Place, the Texas Safe Place, the Safe Place, the Texas people, you know, or Bravo, and just being like, I mean, that might be an idea around like, well, this is what we kind of have come up with, but I also think that one of the other ways in which you facilitate this is by having that discussion around. I mean, I think that that's a lot of the challenges that we do face is what, you know, we see this history, but what do we understand about, who writes history, what it is that history looks like, how, and I remember one of the things that I will always remember when I was on a random webinar, see, I do listen to webinars occasionally, you know, one of the things that Terry P. said from the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health is a lot of our models are based on this, she called it well women with problems.
Right.
And like, so like my life is pretty functional and I have this batterer and like this problem with domestic violence, but kind of like everything else is cool. And I think I think to a certain extent some of our stuff around battering too is like, well, I have these batterers who have good jobs and have good relationships and they're just these assholes with their partners. And I think that that's true sometimes, but I think the reality just is in service provision, we're seeing people with just a lot more stuff. And it's not always about power and control. This is the other thing that gets all, like with all of the trauma stuff, and we look at trauma histories of people who are coming in shelter and they have, you know, childhood, adverse ACEs and all of that, and there's issues with substance use and there's issues with criminal histories and there's all this kind of stuff. So we have a lot of these models about like, well, assuming that the domestic violence is the issue and we deal with that, then everything else is pretty functional. So, I mean, I think but I just was wondering if like maybe for some of those pieces, you know, it would be worth sending this along to some of the you know, our TA providers that do work with culturally specific organizations. But what you don't want is another 14 pages.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's that kind of back and forth of when you put something else in, something else needs to come out. And a part of that also, how extensive and how long that is, depends on how much time you have with people, how much, you know, I mean, and that was what I was kind of arguing with Tanya about. Like, I mean, I know lots of stuff has happened, you know, since 1985, and you can have each year, there can be 10 bullet points on each year. But what is overall, like, what's our overall goal with this group? And I think that my overall goal is always like, oh my gosh, this stuff is deep, 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 deep. And it's not about you knowing what year VAW passed.
Right. Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Well, I think what came when we were in California, I think what I took away from the movement piece wasn't a reminder of all the history. It was like, because I didn't have that knowledge before of all the pieces, so there was an awareness building piece. But when they asked us to do 3 post-its of at what point in your life
that was fabulous.
Did this become a place where you are part of this movement? And I think that's really integral, whether it's the staff who've been here forever at our agency or interns coming in or brand new young staff. It's getting our feet, so to speak, to be really rooted into like what brought us here, what is our passion, not just like what do we do, but like why do we do this work, and
so
why
do it's political thing, you know?
Pardon me?
It's a personalist political thing. And I mean, I think that was what was, I mean, what I remember from that, and that was one of the pieces that I really liked. And again, we haven't, and a part of it is because we don't have time to make up a poster like that and do all, because I really liked, I mean, and I think, again, like how in the context of a training, I mean, you got to think about like how much, I think that's the other thing, is that needs some time. That needs a really, like, I remember there was music playing that, and like making sure that that's, and I mean, and that might want to be like you're going to do an hour and that's all you're going to do, is think about why we got into this work and how this work connects to us. And that's fine.
Actually,
but, you know, like,
Rachel, that's actually what we're going to do. We're going to do a 2-hour session with as many staff as we can get together in one of our largest group rooms, and then we're going to do it like that. We're going to put we've got the poster thing we're going to put on the long wall, do it exactly the same, and take about an hour. And then actually the second hour, we're going to have our CEO, President and CEO talk about and engage in a discussion about where we're at in our current strategic plan, because those two things really need to be aligned. So that's a 2-hour session, and we think it'll be really doable.
yeah, no, I think that's good. I do. I think that sounds like great. Should totally invite me. I probably won't be able to come, but I'd love to see how it goes. The only thing that I like as much as training is going to trainings, so that's why I'm in the job, huh?
Okay, well, we'll invite you to one of them, if not the first one. We'll.
No, but I'd love to hear about how that goes, because I think that the other thing it does, because I think that the pieces, there's also the bigger piece and how we fit, but I think it's also some of that personal reflection stuff that, you know, so much of, I just actually got done doing ethics. I was in Greene County doing ethics yesterday, and it was, you know, it was all about like what is all of the personal stuff that we bring into our work, about why we do this and how we got involved in that, and that just shapes, like the longer I do this and the more advocates I train, it just shapes so much of everything that we do. And having those identified, some of those reasons identified and clarified, which most of us have never really sat and thought about. And not just sat and thought about, but like wrote them down and really made some of those connections, is a very powerful experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that'll be great. You guys are awesome.
Well, it's been so wonderful to hear everything that you both, all three of you have done. It's really exciting from my perspective.
Ohio is just totally full of rock stars, is all I have to say.
I know. It's funny because Christopher and I were just having that conversation. I was like, everyone on my Google Hangout is from Ohio.
And I was like, yep.
Well, you know, if we were from California and had an ocean, we'd be out surfing.
Do we? Like, you know how cold it was all winter? Like, well, I guess we should figure out this freaking exercise because we can't be outside for 4 months, so gotta do something.
That's fantastic. At least it contributes to everyone's productivity.
There you go. There we go.
There you go.
Well, I think Kristen's got to run, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Alana. It was
Yes,
Keep
thank
in
you.
touch. Let me know how it goes, and I'll send you some of the stuff that we use, Kristen. But you know, call me and let me know if you all, or email me, or you can Google buzz me, and I totally won't answer because I don't really know how, and I'm never on this on purpose. So, anyway. There's this thing we have. It's a telephone, so you can feel free to call. Let me know if it can be helpful or help you think through that in any way, shape, or form. Because I'd love to see how that works for you.
awesome.
All right.
All right. Best
Bye.
of luck. Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
Alana.
Thank you.
Bye. Great. Well, I think this has been fantastic, and yeah.
Cool. Cool. Well, thanks, Alana, for all the stuff, but I'm glad that
Yeah,
this
definitely.
works.
Sorry for all the technical difficulties.
It happens. This is why I don't use technology. Once again, this is why I never get good at this stuff. Same thing. I was at a church this morning, and like the sound didn't work, and the clicker didn't work, and I was like, this is why I just bring my flip chart everywhere because it doesn't have. So, all right. Well, thanks so much. You take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye.